Okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Item number 2 is approve the tentative agenda.
Make a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the agenda as it was presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Gary.
I will gladly do it.
Excellent. Amanda, if you'd read the minute. Fifth meeting.
There you are.
All right. June 5th, 2023. Chairman Clues called the regular meeting of the Wright County Board of Supervisors to order at 9 a.m. Members present were Clues, Rasmussen, and Hillgold. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to approve the tentative agenda with moving 9B closed session to item number 10 and 9C closed session to item number 11. Motion carries. Minutes of the previous regular meeting of May 30th, 2023 were read and approved claims for payment. In open forum, Bob Ritter spoke about PHMSA Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration meeting that was held last week. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to approve the liquor license for Casey's Marketing Company, Dow's, Iowa, pending DRAM. Motion carries. Adam Clemens, Wright County Engineer, gave an update on the secondary roads. There are 7 work orders completed last week. Blades will be spot blading intersections, railroad crossings, and bridge approaches. Year 3 rock miles are 81% complete. Mowing of the granular roads will start in the Dow's area. Denko will be sealing cracks on C-54 east of Highway 69 and R-75 down to Hamilton County line and R-33 up Hancock Avenue to the Hancock County line. Hillgold has left the meeting, held the second reading of resolution 2023-23. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Clues to approve the second reading on declaring emergency medical service as an essential service in Wright County and appoint Wright County EMS System Advisory Council. Motion carries. Hillgold has returned the meeting. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to approve resolution 2023-24 for the 2022-2023 budget amendment number 1. By roll call vote, ayes. Clues, Rasmussen, and Hillgold, nays, none. Resolution 2023-24 duly passes and reads as follows. And there you can see the resolution. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to move into closed session at 10:18 a.m. pursuant to Iowa Code Chapter 21.51J to discuss the purchase of or sale of a particular real estate only where premature disclosure could reasonably expected to increase the governmental body would have to pay for the property or reduce the price of the governmental body would receive for the property. By roll call vote, ayes, Clues, Rasmussen, and Hillgold, nays, none. Motion carries. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to move into open session at 11:37 a.m. Motion carries. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to proceed with Plan A as discussed in closed session. Motion carries. Motion by Rasmussen and second by Hillgold to move into closed session at 11:38 a.m. pursuant to Iowa Code Chapter 21.5C to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosures would likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in the litigation. By roll call vote, ayes, Clues, Rasmussen, and Hillgold, nays, none. Motion carries. Motion by Hillgold, second by Rasmussen to move into open session at 12:18 p.m. Motion carries. There was no action taken concerning closed session. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Hillgold to adjourn the meeting. Motion carries.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, they'll stand approved as read. Item number 4 is claims. They've been around. Have you got all the signatures that you need?
Yeah, they're out there.
Okay, open forum for public input. Probably some of you are going to want to speak after the safety presentation. And in wanting to run an orderly meeting, if that is the case, we'll probably limit comments to 3 minutes. I would ask that everybody be respectful of everyone else during the meeting, but you also have an opportunity here if you're worried that there might not be enough time, or if you might not be able to stay for the entire presentation. Any comments?
Is there more chairs back there, you guys? Okay. All right, that's all there is, guys. Pick the door.
Unless you want the hot seat.
Yeah, there is three in the middle.
Okay, item number 6, reappointment of John Brock to the Conservation Board for another 5-year term. Eric, did you have any comments on this?
I inquired if he was still wanting to be reappointed and said yes, so.
I'll make a motion to reappoint John Brock for another 5-year term. Second.
I have a motion and a second to reappoint John Brock to the Conservation Board for a 5-year term. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 7, review and act on resolution 2023-25 on appropriation of money to various departments for fiscal year 2023, 2024. This would be beginning July 1st. That paperwork was in our boxes last week. Betty, do you have any comments on this?
That's this week, yeah.
I've got it. I've got it.
Okay, so this resolution is, we went through a budgeting process back in March and April. And at that time, you set the budgets and the salaries and stuff like that. And then, so this is appropriating the money to each of the different departments. The total budget for the county will be $25,039,639. And that is if every department spent every dollar that was appropriated to them. That doesn't normally happen, so.
Right.
But, and in order to write any checks starting July 1, our fiscal year end is June 30th, so starting July 1, this is what the new budgets will be for.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve resolution 2023-25 on appropriated money for various departments of fiscal year 2023-2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2023-25. Resolution to appropriate money for fiscal year 2023-2024. I just would make one comment. It goes along with Betty's. Each week we get a report that shows where we're at on spending for each individual department. And, you know, typically we're at I would say there's an average on here, 83% of what was budgeted. So by roll call vote, Paul.
Aye.
Rick.
Aye.
Dean. Aye. Motion carried.
Can you sign that, please? And
This one?
yeah,
Yeah.
that one and the other one, unless you want to keep, do you want yours? Did you want to keep your copy?
Yes.
Okay.
So you want another copy?
I can make a copy of this.
I got this one. And then this one. Okay, item number 8, receive monthly revenue report for the Wright County Sheriff.
I have that. Got it. It's in here somewhere. We'll just go to the next one until I find it.
Okay,
Oh, nope, got it, found it. Too many papers.
for the month of May of 2023. County Park Service fees and mileage, $2,416.67. County new and renewed weapons permits, $180, and copy fees of $160 for a total of $2,756.66. I would make a motion to receive the sheriff's monthly report for May.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the county sheriff's report of fees collected for the month of May. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Item number 9, review and act on fireworks permit for 4G pyrotechnics.
So he sent us a list. The first one is gonna be for this weekend, and this is gonna be for the safety and training sessions for all of his, and for his employees, for 4G.
Does that say where that's held?
1550 Highway 69.
At their facility.
Yeah. Okay, so that will be on the 16th. And then they have one at 1644 Quincy Avenue in Belmont,
Okay,
one at 2787 130th Drive, Belmont.
okay.
They have the Lake Cornelia, 1636 160th Street, Clarion.
Okay,
And then 1179 Taylor Avenue, Belmont. And that is on August 19th. The one before that's July 22nd. July 1st is Lake Cornelia.
Good.
Lake Cornelia is July 1st, so. Okay,
Make a motion to approve the fireworks permits.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to review and act on, or to approve the fireworks permits submitted by 4G Pyrotechnics. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
signing. Yeah, sign those two, please. I need 2 copies.
Copies.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry,
Okay,
we've got time.
yeah,
He will be opening to the public on tomorrow, the 13th.
pardon me.
He will open to the public tomorrow. the
Okay.
13th.
So for retail,
Yes, sir.
Are they setting up a tent there, or they'll do it out of the permanent building?
It is now part of the permanent structure on Highway 69.
Great.
4G Pyrotech.
it used to be right that salvage yard used to be. Is that where the salvage yard used to be?
Yes,
Yeah.
South of Belmont is 69.
Okay,
Mhm.
used to be, I had cars, we
Yeah.
had trouble with the fencing
Even a
all the
greater
time.
improvement, actually.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Is there a certain period of time where we don't have to get a permit for fireworks, so with the new,
Here.
the new
So-
rules?
June 1 to July 8.
Here,
Read the top. So a filing fee is $10 shall be assessed to all firework permit applications filed outside of the state permitted dates of June 1 through July 8 and December 10th through July 3rd.
Okay.
And but his is different because of his, but he's doing it. That is if you're a personal,
Personal.
but he's doing it for hire.
You can get the city of Belmont permit for the over the floor or from the city of Belmont.
Okay.
Yeah, this is only if they're outside.
county.
If they're
in the
inside,
county.
then you have to go to the city.
Those both planned events. Adam,
Yes, sir.
any idea how long it'll take you to do yours? 15 minutes, can we do that? Okay. We'll skip down to item number 10 is the timed event, and item number 11 also. We'll skip down to item 12, Adam Cummins, Wright County Engineer, secondary roads update.
Do we have, is the secondary roads updater first and then, or fuel prices first?
Fuel prices.
Your
was not on
places
here.
weren't on the agenda.
I'll get it on next week.
Yep.
All right. So update, guys were out spot, prepping and level rock miles. We got completed with rock miles last week, on Wednesday. So we're all done with that. They moved to gravel miles this week. Trucks were cold patching in and hauling the rock miles. Work orders we got completed were 8. We got rained out a couple times last week, so they couldn't, go with the excavator. Construction C70, the HMA service lift has been put on and the yellow has been painted on there. We're waiting for the white paint to be done. R75, the bridge approaches, we're redoing all 4 or both ends of the bridge approach this week and probably next. Going to take about 3 days per quarter of the bridge. And then we still have a position open in Eagle Grove. So,
The surface lift, that was on the S curve down there.
yes,
Okay. And,
shouldering should be here soon. It's just when they can come in and get it done.
okay,
And they've got the signs on C-54.
Yeah.
To start by my road.
Yeah, they started last week with the crack sealing.
okay.
Down on R75 move around, so. We'll probably be starting painting on the southern half of the county this week. Pending weather, obviously, but where they're at right now, I think it's up in Hancock County and they got rained out a couple times, so.
Okay.
It might be a little later this week, but we're gonna put them on the west side to allow for Denko to get done with the crack sealing on the east.
So no more bump down on the,
No, should be done. Should be good.
all right, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Not needed.
I don't think the guy had anything.
Economic development tomorrow morning at 7. I'm working with Mark Thompson, DNRs and the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship on some of the manure piles that we've seen around Wright County.
Okay.
And how that kind of falls between the 2 jurisdictions. I've been in contact with the landowner. I've got a call, we're gonna have a call this afternoon to see what he can do on that. They're supposed to be spraying a couple of the piles today
For flies.
for flies. It's kind of unusual because we've seen it being stockpiled in the spring and not being spread until fall. My main complaints have been actually from people that normally wouldn't complain. It was there for 30 days. They deal with it in the fall, but having it sit that close to a home all summer is kind of unnerving. And they're within the guidelines, but it's not necessarily good practices or just because you can doesn't mean you should. So Mark Thompson's been good. I'm meeting with Senator Guth tomorrow to review that. Our hands are somewhat tied at our level, and I would hope we wouldn't have to go to the state to have legislation change, but it's just one part of the organization or that business is just not doing good practices.
And that's because it became fertilizer.
Chicken litter is considered fertilizer and not manure based on the license you have. So if you have hog manure, it has to be tilled in under manure management plans. But chicken litter is not considered manure, even though it's a pile of chicken manure. It is considered fertilizer, so it is not regulated by the DNR. It's regulated by IDLs, which have different rules. And DNR has been really helpful. If it leaches, if it does anything like that, they're more than willing to come out. IDLs are the same way, but both of their hands are tied as long as they're within the distances. And the distances are, I think it's 500 feet from a house, which is just, it's just not acceptable. So I'll keep you up to speed on that, but that's kind of been developing this last week.
I didn't have anything. I'm out of town this week over in Bristol. Okay, we will be in recess until.
Dean?
9.
We opened up a Zoom here in the next room.
Okay. Great. If you guys would like to go next door, there's a Zoom link over there.
Or you can stand. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
Or you take the hot seats.
I'll sell the check for $50.
Okay, we will be in recess until
Should have been on there.
9:25.
Hi, Dave.
Phone a friend.
Yeah,
So, but,
Where are you, Greg?
huh?
I've got two here.
All right, we are out of recess. You can continue to converse. We'll start promptly at 9:30.
We're busy.
Dean.
Busy all the
Yes.
time.
So,
Raised a lot of the stuff ourselves.
Fuel this.
Okay.
If you want.
We're spot out of that stuff, which I'm glad. Then we'll be full bore in the landscaping.
Yeah.
To approve.
I got,
Everyone up pretty up.
yeah, I got 3 crews running right now. The pain in the ass.
Does that work for him?
You and your brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You got kids working.
Got about 15 kids. Fucking nightmare.
Since we didn't get that on the agenda,
Trying to get them to show up.
If,
Work and do a good
we
job.
allow you to discuss that and we put it on an agenda for Wednesday.
Everywhere.
Are you guys meeting Wednesday?
a special meeting. We can just do it over Zoom and approve it then.
Going good down there.
Does that work or
Yeah,
not?
that's fine. We
Truck
can do that.
working out good.
Okay.
Huh?
Truck working out good.
Yeah. So far, so good.
Good.
Need to get it out more, but, yeah. Want to make stuff happen and
No,
call us, so.
I'd rather be sitting.
Yeah.
Great to see you guys here.
Yeah, I put in order that we're gonna go.
We'll put it in there.
I'll remind you.
This looks similar to what, there's some new stuff here. I can see that.
Yeah, there's a study that actually just came out on Thursday.
Okay.
Brand new, even us.
See Chris, I made the front page.
Yeah. I did.
Oh, geez. It's pretty good.
See Chris on you?
Miss and Becky Bissell and Amanda Lasky, auditor.
It's just right.
Yeah. So now, and he used to be supervisor, and now he's an auditor. Yeah, he said he's done things if done. I have no idea. I don't know why. But yeah, it's crazy.
You up for that? You last on Saturday night?
No, we had ours out at the Red Shed when we were done with the meal and the program.
That was a good point. Stayed on.
Yeah. But I was out late on Friday. You did drive it now.
I got home at 12.
I think 12:30.
Yes, they will. Go. Yeah. I'll get that one.
All right, I got one.
You want, oh, you got one?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
This all.
When you're back in here.
Yes, I didn't hear that yet, I think. Pretty sure.
Okay, it's 9:30. Timed event, Summit Carbon Solutions to give a comprehensive safety presentation for the CO2 pipeline. They had called to get on the agenda to present this. I had asked Steve Bergen-Redder, correct? Is it close? Close enough.
Common spelling.
Who was the Fort Dodge Fire Chief and also the hazmat for District 5, District 5 coordinator, and does all the training for local responders concerning hazmat. So with that, Kylie, over to you.
I'm Kylie Lang, the Iowa project manager.
I'm Dave Dom. I'm the Senior Director of Health Safety, Security and Environmental for Senate.
Then we've also over here, we've got JD, who's our ag representative, and Isaac, who's our construction. Kaylee, who usually gives the presentations. Online, we listened to, I know you said comprehensive safety, but we listened to what you guys were concerned about. We knew what you guys were bringing in terms of emergency management. So we're gonna focus it on that center.
Okay.
Obviously, if we want to go broader, we can.
Okay.
But unless you want me to talk for an hour and a half, we had to pick some topics.
No, probably.
So I figured we didn't. So online, we have John Godfrey. He's a senior principal consultant with DNV. DNV is an international engineering company with over 12,000 employees operating in 100 countries. Mr. Godfrey has over 35 years of experience in the design, construction, operation, maintenance, compliance, and safety of pipeline systems. And he's going to do the first several slides of this presentation. So John, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present remotely. As Kylie said, I'm with DNV. Our office is located in Dublin, Ohio, but I actually work out of the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. So it's great to be with you all this morning. I'm going to touch a little bit on pipeline safety issues and about CO2 pipelines specifically. Something else about DNV, however, we are an international standards body. And we have the international recommended practice out for the design, construction, and operation of CO2 pipelines. We also conduct full-scale experimental testing where we validate the performance of CO2 pipelines and other pipeline facilities in general. So we have been involved in CO2 research and standard setting for well over 10 years. So we're using that information to assist companies like Summit in developing their response to your questions and helping them improve their emergency response and emergency management planning. So if we could go to the first slide, please, Kylie, or whoever's driving the slide deck. There we go. Just a little bit. PHMSA has already been mentioned here today. So a little bit about PHMSA and how it relates to pipelines in general. The Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration manages all interstate, the safety of all interstate pipeline assets. And that includes CO2. CO2 is regulated as a hazardous liquid under Part 195 of the Federal Code. That's the same that's the same regulations that apply to things such as propane, diesel fuel, gasoline, anhydrous ammonia, any range of products that are transported by pipe in the liquid or dense phase. CO2 is transported primarily in industry as a supercritical product in what's called dense phase. And that's basically not a liquid, not a gas, but it's somewhere in between. It has the density of a liquid, but the viscosity of a gas and some of the other properties of a gas. There are gaps in the PHMSA regulations right now. They do not specifically regulate the transmission in liquid form or gas form. However, the projects that are proposed and Summit's design is all in the supercritical phase. So all of these PHMSA regulations will apply. That includes the development of integrity programs, operator qualification in the list you see on the slide before you. One thing to note, while PHMSA doesn't have any specific siting authority, all of these other requirements apply to the sites and to the specific risk of a site when pipeline routes are selected. So for example, if a pipeline is routed near a population center, integrity management program requirements would apply for other and highly populated areas. PHMSA requirements for evaluation of earth movement, the potential for landslides or subsidence, they all apply and are enforceable regardless of the route selected. So pipeline operators look at their siting based upon what ultimately will be part of the pipeline safety regs. Brigham McCowan is a former administrator of PHMSA. He has been testifying on behalf of Summit, and some of his quotations are listed on this slide for your review and where some of his testimony can be found as well. So next slide, please.
So John, can I ask a question before you go on?
Sure.
A little bit confusing. You said that currently PHMSA is not regulating CO2 pipelines either in the gaseous or in the critical dense phase.
No, just the liquid phase.
Okay, just the liquid phase.
Yeah, it's PHMSA doesn't currently have a specific regulation for gas phase transmission or liquid phase transmission, but it does regulate supercritical or dense phase,
Okay.
which is the most common form that CO2 is transported in. That's because it's dense as a liquid, meaning it compresses it and it gets quite a bit in there, but because of its unique properties, it has the viscosity and the flow properties more similar to a gas.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Oh, certainly. CO2 pipelines have been regulated for over 40 years in the United States. We have the most comprehensive CO2 regulatory framework in the world. We have the most experience with CO2 transportation of any country in the world. A lot of DNV's work has been informed by US pipeline performance. Pipelines are still and continue to be the safest way of transporting any commodity, whether that's in liquid or gaseous form. If you didn't see the news just this weekend, a tanker truck in Philadelphia caught fire and part of I-95 collapsed. There's a lot of examples of issues with rail or truck transportation. And while pipelines get significant press when an event occurs, by and large, and per, in this case, barrel mile or million cubic feet per mile of commodity transported are still the safest method in the United States. There's more than 5,000 miles of CO2 pipeline in operation right now. That ranges from 4-inch all the way up to 30-inch diameter, and operating all the way up to 3,000 PSI. So the Summit proposed project is well within the scope of existing pipelines that are currently operating. And next slide, please. Kylie asked me to touch briefly on dispersion modeling, because that is a topic that came up during the PHMSA workshop, and it's something that has been a concern to folks. I'm going to touch on it real briefly, because I have not reviewed Summit's dispersion model, and we did not participate in developing their model. But there's a couple of things that need to be cleared up, I think. When CO2 disperses, it disperses at different levels and different distances, okay? Basically, following an event, you will get a high concentration near the event site, and as you move further away, CO2 disperses in the atmosphere and the concentration drops. The distance of the dispersion is dependent upon the factors of the initial release. What was the pressure? What was the diameter of the line? The environmental conditions, wind speed, temperature, atmospheric stability, and then the elevation or the grade of the land. CO2 is about the same density as propane. It will follow the terrain of the ground and kind of follow low spots as it migrates. But one misconception is that CO2 doesn't travel greater distances with wind. The higher the wind speed, actually, the quicker it disperses. That, if the wind changes direction following a CO2 release, it doesn't move its plume and create whole new areas. The CO2 is dispersing. And also, the location of valves on the pipeline doesn't change the size of any particular dispersion plume, but it changes the time that the dispersion plume exists. So CO2 disperses in the same distance, whether the leak occurs for 5 minutes or for an hour. And depending upon the location of valves, doesn't change the concentration or the distance away from a leak source. It only changes the amount of time the leak is occurring. So next slide, please. I touched a little bit already on the supercritical phase of CO2. But what Summit has done is they have used a canary model, that's a trademark by Quest Integrity, to do their dispersion analysis. As I said, I have not reviewed it and I do not operate Canary. But Canary is similar to other programs such as FAST, and to an extent Aloha, which is used by emergency responders. They are very good tools to get you information on a broad scale. Aloha is designed specifically for first responders. It is there to provide very quick information on a potential gas release, whether it's a tanker truck or a rail car or a pipeline, something that first responders can use on site and get answers within minutes. Canary is a little bit more involved. It looks not just at where a plume could go, but what are the detailed concentrations? What could be in its way? Was this an above ground pipe release or below ground release? What's the surface environment? Is it in the woods? Is it in an open field? All of that can be built in to give a more detailed look at any potential plume. CFD, or computational fluid dynamics, has been referred to both in the PHMSA meeting that was held last week and some other testimony on pipelines. CFD is really a much more detailed numerical analysis. It is extremely detailed. It takes a long time to set up, and it takes a lot of hours to run it. It's impractical to use every place, but it's not a bad complement if you identify a specific risk through the implementation of other dispersion models, such as Canary. If we could move on to the next slide, please. I'm being mindful of your time.
I have another question for you before you move on from that.
Yes.
In the Canary modeling, then, would there be considerations for a temperature inversion where that plume would potentially not disperse as it normally would? Typically, a temperature inversion happens where there's no wind. Can you talk to that, or does that require specific CFD modeling?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on Canary, to tell you the truth, but my understanding is it can account for an inversion scenario where you have very little wind, where you have specific temperatures, and it causes that plume to lay low to the ground. The model has to be tweaked somewhat to do it, but my understanding is, yes, it can take care of an inversion. And I know that's a big concern in your part of the country, in my part of the country as well. That's why we all have to have licenses to spray things like dicamba, is because we're all very concerned about, you know, what happens during an atmospheric inversion, what causes those products to move, and can they migrate off-site or migrate to places that you didn't anticipate. Short answer, yes, it can with some tweaking. But next slide, please.
But you've never utilized it, correct?
I have not used Canary.
Okay.
No, DNV's program, the one that we produce and the one that we primarily utilize is FAST. That's actually a product. We also have an entire group down in our Houston office that does dispersion modeling. And if we want to do full CFD, we have an office over in London that has the personnel and the tools to do that as well.
Okay, so DNV does have the capabilities of doing those.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
I think I already went to the next slide.
Oh, we are on the next slide?
Yep.
Okay, well, I was still seeing the one with the dispersion analysis, but one thing that I guess we are on it because that's the thing I wanted to talk about, the overland modeling and terrain modeling. Terrain modeling for hazardous liquid pipelines has really been around since about 2000. Okay, that's when the integrity management rule for liquid pipelines was promulgated and went into effect. And that's required that pipeline operators assess the risk of transport of any hazardous liquid, oil, propane, anhydrous. If it were to spill, if it were to hit water, if it were to follow a ditch, if it were to follow a valley, where could it go? A lot of tools have been built since then. It's a very well understood methodology to be able to understand that overland spread and where it goes. It uses nationally available digital elevation model data, and operators can account for not just varying terrain, but areas where the product may pool, where it may run into barriers, where it may get caught up in water and transported more quickly. When used in conjunction with a dispersion model, it becomes a pretty powerful tool. So the air dispersion model, such as a FAST or a Canary, will actually say, here's a release of a gas to the atmosphere. What are the concentrations at various distances? When you combine that with a 3D overland model, you get not just the distance and the concentration, but now you get the direction of flow in addition to being pushed by wind. So that's something that it's a combination of different approaches and a combination of techniques, but it covers the full potential risk of CO2 migration off-site when those two programs are used complementary. Now we can go on to the next slide. The Department of Energy right now is sponsoring quite a bit of research in the area of CO2. They recently held a workshop in Columbus, Ohio. They've got another one coming up. Oh, if it's not this week, it's coming up very soon. And they're actually developing a roadmap for research to target different aspects of CO2 transportation. Not the health and safety impacts, those are well studied, but they're looking at things such as impurities in the CO2 stream. What are the possibilities of adding odorant to CO2? Will it work as it does in natural gas? Also, you know, methodologies and recommendations around dispersion analysis. Some of that research has been ongoing and some of it's already been published. This is just one example of a journal article. If we can go to the next slide, there's some interesting results that came out of this. And this is actually the results of a full-scale test that DNV did at our Spade Atom facility in the UK. This is the concentration by volume of CO2 following a full-scale pipeline event. And the air was monitored in the downwind and upwind locations at 50 meters, 150 meters, basically out to 700 meters away from the site of the pipe. The concentrations shown on the left-hand side are taken from really UK Health and Safety Directive, as well as US NIOSH criteria for percent by volume of CO2 in atmosphere. It's not until you get to 15% by volume that it becomes acutely problematic. That's where at 15%, where a normal person would have trouble breathing, would become unconscious, and would have immediate health effects. In this particular test, we only approached that level at about 50 meters away from the site. And you can see as the distance increases, that concentration drops, and it drops quickly. And that's one of the properties of CO2 that's misunderstood. The further you get away from it, the lower the concentration gets. The plume may travel a great distance, but that concentration within that plume drops substantially. And once you get down below 5% by volume, there are some concerns if you're exposed to it for any extended period of time. But that becomes part of the emergency response planning and public awareness campaign, is how to deal with it to keep people out of those plumes in the very, very unlikely event that one would occur. To minimize the exposure time is the primary thing that has to be done. That's at least what the full-scale testing has been showing us.
And I appreciate the slide, but this, you know, there's no reference of wind or atmospherics or volume compared to the volumes that we may be looking at. So, you know, to me, this is superfluous, I guess, for lack of a better term, because I'm looking for specifics.
Right, right. I understand that. This was not done to try to be specific to any given situation. It was done to help fine-tune the models. It was to give some empirical evidence that could be compared to the output of various models and publish that so that the model developers could validate the performance of their dispersion modeling. The dispersion modeling informs the operator of the risk so that they can take steps to ultimately prevent any sort of release from happening at all. That's the primary goal, is to understand what can happen in the environment so that you can improve your integrity management programs, your design, your maintenance, so that, one, you just keep these things from happening in the first place. But just for your information, yeah, the wind speed and all that stuff is in part of the journal article, but it was done to be a very specific set of conditions. So that it could be directly compared to modeling. Yeah, it's not all encompassing, to your point.
I have a question for you, sir. I'm looking at the graph, the CO2 concentration is what you're talking about.
Yes.
At 15%. That, is that what you're saying? It doesn't become toxic until 15%? Or did you mean humans aren't affected until oxygen drops 15%? Maybe I misunderstood you.
No, CO2 is classified in an MSDS sheet as an asphyxiant. However, at levels where it doesn't displace the oxygen, which normally occurs at about 21% by volume. But if CO2 gets up to 15% by volume, it actually changes blood chemistry. You can still be breathing in the same amount of oxygen, but the CO2 that you're breathing in starts to make your blood acidic. It starts to affect your respiration rate, your cognitive rate, and 15% by volume is published in our recommended practice as part of our toxicology information. I'm not a toxicologist, but it's published in the DNV standard as the threshold for immediate loss of consciousness and effects on respiration. This is where somebody doesn't want to be in that cloud for even a minute or two.
Would a normal first responder oxygen sensor, would their oxygens even show a decrease at 15% carbon dioxide?
That's a very good question. I would expect so, because carbon dioxide occurs at less than, I think you said you had some emergency response folks in the room. So guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but it occurs at less than 2% by volume, or is it less than 1% by volume?
I'm a first responder, so our meters would go off at 1% drop of oxygen.
Yeah,
Then
you should.
We would see that, and I didn't know if
You should.
Carbon dioxide would change the.
No, you should see it because it's a percent by volume. So it's reducing other gases in air by, the 15% overall. So with oxygen having a 21% composition in normal air, an increase from 1 to 15% of CO2 will have a corresponding effect on the nitrogen, the oxygen, all the other gases that comprise air. And I would expect to see a percentage or 2% drop in the O2 level. Just based on math.
I think it would be somewhere around 18, between 18.
It'd show like 18% oxygen. Okay.
O2,
Okay. Thank
it would
you.
be somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Don't, I can calculate it.
At a concentration of 15 or at a concentration lower than that?
Say it again.
At a concentration of 15, it would show 18, or a concentration lower than that. The graph shows, approximately 13%. Would that displace 13% of the oxygen?
No, if you had 15% oxygen, it would bring, or 15% CO2, it would bring your oxygen down about 3% from the 21.
Okay.
Give or take, quarter or 0.5% without doing the calculation.
Okay.
Were there any parts per million readings done to see what the exposure
So
was?
15% CO2 is 150,000 ppm.
It was just done in different country.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it would be much nicer. If it was in parts per million, but if you can translate them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense now.
Go ahead, John.
That's all I had. I was gonna I'll stay here and answer any of your questions, but at this point, pass it on back to the rest of the summit team for, their discussion.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, so I think it does.
It's just 100%, 150,000
Yeah.
parts per million would be a 3% drop on. Yeah.
So I think it gets a little confusing too, because I think what John was saying about, when you talk about 15% of CO2 in air, if oxygen is 21, then you're talking about CO2 as being toxic to someone's body, compared to an asphyxiant where, 50% oxygen level, is different than 15% CO2 level effect on the body. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you gotta be careful on the, you know, on actually what you're looking at.
Right.
So I'm gonna quickly go through, our first responder plan, an emergency response plan. This slide is just showing you where we're getting our regulation from. This is within DOT 195. So these are just for everyone's reference, important sections in terms of emergency response. So what we have is a draft. You guys received copies. I get the emergency responders copies of what will be our first response preparedness training program. We'll go county by county or, location by location within the county and make sure we have a comprehensive plan based on what's happening in your county. So as you go through this draft, it's majorly blank because when we get into when we get into construction, we will go county by county and fill this out with the emergency managers, with the lead responders. It includes high concentration area reviews. How are we going to handle your one call notification systems? And then the most important to you guys is the dispersion modeling. So we'll at this point say, here are the high points, worst case scenarios, temperature inverts. This is what it's going to look like in the summer. This is what it's going to look like in the winter, and we'll run scenarios based on those dispersion modeling. So that will be filled out in your guys' specific emergency response plan. And then also, in an unlikely worst case scenario, how are we going to handle it? What it is a perimeter is built by first responders, and then we have our own team who comes in and will lead the response going forward. But obviously there's that immediate first response that we will train and work through this document, as well as a full emergency management thicker document that kind of works for all the counties. And we were required to come back, review and train with you annually, not to exceed 15 months, to make sure it's updated. And then every time you guys have new employees, we can decide your guys' preference on train the trainer, have us come back in and train. That'll all fall to when we build this program out, we'll decide what your guys' needs are. You guys have the capabilities for reverse 911, what we want to do for our notifications to the public. And all those things will be decided when we do the sit down and build this plan out.
Heard what you said about, a lot of, most of the people are volunteers, so, they have other jobs and things like that. So we're working on different ways and, that we can get the training to them in a manner that's, convenient for them as well. Like if we have to do different sessions or if it's electronic or whatever it may be. So we're looking at all those things.
When you come to Clarion, Steve, and train the volunteers here, is it like a 1 hour training or over a year?
Usually we do 3 to 4 hour classes at night. Usually we try to do it before, usually try to do it in February. So when there are, people working in the ag, and we usually do like 5 nights of training around the county. So we'll get well over 200 first responders go through the training from law enforcement, EMS and fire. So great. I'm not saying this because I'm in Wright County, but Wright County will train more first responders than all the other 8 counties in Region 5. So, and it's been that way for a long time. So, yeah.
Good. Go ahead.
So I wanted to touch on we've heard a lot that there's a lot of research going on around CO2. Well, one of what we consider a big and important study came out on Thursday. So it's the first time we saw it. It was sponsored by API, Denbury, E3 Environmental. It was ran by CTEH, just a company similar to DNV in terms of research. I gave you guys a copy of it. I believe it's going to be posted publicly by the end of the week. They're going to get some add-ons in terms of data at the back end of the document. It's just not out yet. Kaylee nicely summarized it in terms of high point topics. So what they did was they tested the difference between sheltering in place first being evacuated. And they brought in two campers, placed them next to each other and put a tent over top of them. The tent allowed the CO2 to remain without dispersion at specific rates. And they did a test for 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 parts per million. And then they spiked tested it higher. So at 10, 20, 30, 40, it was a 4-hour long test where they held that parts per million to see if sheltering in place was a option. And what it came out to be is that, well, at all the tests, 10,000 through 40,000, the O2 never dropped below the allowable 19.5% indoors. They even did tests where they had the windows open in the van in a controlled environment, right? No dispersion taking place. And even at 50,000 parts per million, which was one of their spike tests, it only went down to 19.3. And I guess, in case everyone doesn't know, the allowable limits of O2 fall between 19.5 to 23.5, somewhere on the high end. So what it said is, what this study shows is that, I'll just reiterate, the results indicate that SIP, which is shelter in place for several hours, provided reduced CO2 exposure relative to outdoor concentrations, with breathing zone concentrations remaining below 5,000 parts per million for at least 2 hours into the simulated incident. So what it's showing is indoor, even in this situation with your windows open, sheltering in place is a viable option where the parts per million are not coming up to dangerous levels. So rather than evacuating houses and in a worst case unlikely scenario, shelter in place is looking like the best situation and the best option. And this is a little bit different, right? It's not flammable and it's not explosive, so there's no other risks beyond asphyxiation. And it's, these were just camper vans. So in terms of the house, it should have, and then it goes into this in the study, greater ability to keep out CO2. So it's a pretty interesting study. Brandy, I gave you guys a copy of it. Yeah, anything else on it?
Yeah, no, so it's something we're looking at least as an initial, part of the response. To determine, it may depend on where it's at and what locations and, the modeling and things like that to say, in this area, that might be the right answer, and another area may not, but it is, there are more studies coming out like this, so we are reviewing all those to see where that might apply.
So did either of you listen to the PIMSA meeting or watch that by webcast? You weren't present, at least I didn't see you present there, but did you
I watched a good part of it.
okay, were you watching when the people from Satarsha, Mississippi and the first responder who pulled people out of a vehicle that were not responsive? They didn't die, but I think their heart rate was 4 beats a minute, I think they told us. So in a sealed vehicle, that seems like those two, an eyewitness account and a simulated deal.
Yeah. I guess it depends on, part of it depends on the concentration, right? And, in Satarsha, if you looked at some of the pictures and stuff, there was a road right near.
Right.
And now, I don't know if that's where those vehicles were, but if they were, they would be probably in a higher concentration than what was in this study. Compared to being, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,500, whatever it may be. So, it just depends, it depends on concentration.
I think it's also, worth noting, and they note it in here when they reference it, we don't know what the concentration of the H2S was. That also was an effect in the situations. So they kind of said it's hard to use this, and that is a baseline because we're referencing pure CO2 or CO2 with other toxins.
But do you know for sure that yours will be CO2 and it won't have other impurities in it?
We have to test it going in and we have to test it coming out, for it to even be capable of going into a class as well.
And there are other industries that are being solicited to utilize the pipeline how are you going to police that?
They will have to follow the same regulations of getting the test before they can ever enter into the pipeline.
And who monitors that?
I'm assuming the state of North Dakota, but I don't know that.
Okay.
Because that's where we get our Class 6 well from, and that's where the monitoring requirements, they set the monitoring requirements. I guess I don't know who regulates it, because I just don't work on the sequestration side.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Nope, that's actually what I have. I tried to keep it brief. I wanna, didn't hit on it, but the most important, we're building this pipeline to prevent these incidents. We're talking about the one-offs and the rares and the unlikely situations. We have robust plans to prevent this. We have, we're looking at pressure propagation, we're looking at erosion at waterways, we're looking at heavier wall pipe, we're looking at high populated areas. We're taking all of those into account before this ever happens. This is, there's been one incident in the history of CO2 pipelines that is worth talking about. We realize it happens, we plan for it, but it's incredibly unlikely, and our integrity management plan is in place to prevent this from ever needing to be discussed.
Well, I think it needs to be discussed.
I guess.
You can tell it needs to be discussed. Yeah.
Hey, Dean, may I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sandy.
Sandy,
Sure,
Sandy McGrath.
yeah.
I'm in the other room.
County
Okay.
Senate and Public Health Director.
Yeah, so I'm trying to sort out the apples and the oranges. So what I know as a nurse, and there's first responders in the room that'll agree, that if someone's, the target pulse oxygen saturation for a human being is 92 to 96%. Anything below 92, you need to seek medical attention. Maybe not immediately, but 88, we would be reacting and wondering what's happening. Now, with that in mind, we're talking about the oxygen available in the air. So at 19.5%, anything below that is considered O2 deficient. So doesn't OSHA say 16 to 19.5 would be a hazard and a risk to a human being? So I'm struggling, and maybe the others, and maybe Hazmat, you can help me out. I'm struggling with the apples and oranges on what is actually safe and what is actually being tested to be safe. Because I understand when you're talking about the 4% level, is it displacing or is it not displacing? All I know is anything below 19.5 is oxygen deficient. So someone breathing that oxygen deficient air is going to have trouble.
Well, I can take a crack at that, at least at the high level, if you all like.
Hey, John, that's
Oh.
John.
John, hang on just for a second. I think our first responder, Steve, is gonna see if he can address it.
I'll just to say to Sandy at 19.5%, probably most people, if we were at 19.5% oxygen in this room in here, most of us might not even know it. At that level. OSHA's regulation is not gonna be at a point where we would cause impact on you. They're gonna have a little safety buffer. I think once you start getting down to like 16, 17%, we would start to feel some effects where it may start to feel tired or feeling a little different.
Dizziness, those.
Yeah, you'd feel some effects of, if it dropped to that level, but at 19.5, probably most humans wouldn't even know there's a change.
And you gotta remember, OSHA and NIOSH and that are for basically workers who are working with these things, not necessarily for a release kind of response. So it's a bit different. They make up their levels for different reasons. Because they know there's gonna be people exposed for certain amounts of time because they're working directly with CO2 compared to an emergency release.
So what he's saying there is that you could OSHA would allow you to be at like 19.5 for 8-hour day or 40-hour work week. Once you get below that, then you gotta change the atmosphere or wear a respirator, but yeah, the average.
There's certain
the
levels
average
they
adult
allow you
would
for 15
be at
minutes.
8 hours a day, not 9.
Yeah, they, in this study, actually, I said to find it, high tolerability of 90,000 parts per million. They tested it for 60 minutes in healthy volunteers and saw no side effects.
Yeah, so like you said, you know, like. What did you say, 15 to 17%, you're gonna have some effects.
Yeah.
You know, maybe dizziness, nausea, those kinds of things, you get a little lower. You know, it might be worse effects down to like 12%. Oxygen level, you know, you might get to unconsciousness at that level and below, so. And it depends, you know, everybody's health is a little bit different as well, right? So.
We're talking general population.
Yeah, yes.
Right. I haven't, you know, I see the date on it's June 7th, obviously,
Right.
I haven't had a chance to look at this and I don't know how much of it I will understand, but you know that I'll ask the question if
It's
I
actually
don't
pretty-
understand.
Pretty easy to understand,
Yeah.
but definitely reach out. I was, you know, some of the stuff is hard for me, being
Yeah.
not a first responder, and this one's pretty good.
And did you get a copy of it? Cindy?
Another data point.
Okay. But was there any other part of the presentation? No. So I guess the overriding question for me is, it seems to me after attending the PIMS meeting and hearing a representative from DNV speak, and hear other people that are in the industry speak, with the safety concern, they talked about the CFD modeling was the best that you can get. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I wouldn't disagree with the detail that it gives, but the feasibility of doing it is virtually impossible. That doesn't mean we can't, and we won't look at specific areas and use that CFD in areas where it makes sense to do it, right? Versus across the entire system, we'll have the ability to have a good understanding of the models, the Canary model that we already use. But when we're looking in specific situations, we have that in our back pocket to use. To get additional detail, I think is how we're using the CFD model.
And will your Canary model and with the lack of the CFD model, will it give us at some point a release between our valves with the pressures that we'll be operating, if we had a release, a distance,
That'll be trained with
Setback.
all the first responders.
Right.
For them to be able to set their barriers up at the, 10, 40, 80,000 part per million. Reach zones.
the concern of some of the people that are sitting in here is, they heard firsthand accounts from Satarsha and a release there. And I know that there was evidence of hydrogen sulfide in that pipeline mixed in with the CO2 also. That aside, that's where the concern is coming from. And they heard him say, at least he said to me when I had lunch with him, that I asked him if it was within a mile of you, would you be concerned? And he said, yes. If it was within 2 miles of you, would it be concerned? We were talking about dwelling places. And so there's information out there from firsthand accounts that may not match specifically. But there was also a lot of discussion about impurities in the pipeline and the ability to keep it at 0 and absolutely pure. It didn't sound to me like the industry had that nailed down either.
I think that it definitely is ongoing with research, but I think specifically where we're pulling from, where, when they're talking the broad industry, where at this point, we only have the infrastructure to pull from ethanol plants where they come out already pure CO2. So in terms of having to separate and purify our job's a lot simpler than a lot of other CO2 companies, just because of the product that we're pulling from.
Yeah, and, you know, we're modeling every segment of pipeline along the way, so, you know, that's the information we need to inform our integrity management program as well as our emergency response.
Right. And again, highly populated area, goes pretty close to Eagle Grove, and of course, it's inside the city limits of Goldfield, so there's definitely specific concerns with that. I really like to see CFD model and the plumes. I mean,
And Dows.
I want to see that.
Yes, it's pretty close to Dow's too.
Yeah.
I think we're about a mile from the house.
The only problem I have really with round Dow's is, and I got a lot of problems with it, but from Dow's, you're going through sand, you're going across the river. I mean, the ground is moving so much. And I didn't know what your intent on how you're gonna get across the river south of Dow's.
Yeah, we did a lateral migration study on that river, basically looking back as far as data could take us. And I'd have to look at that river specifically, but 50 to 100 years back. On where was the river at this point? Where is it now and how much has it moved in that time? So it gives us an understanding what's gonna happen in the next 50 years. So we took that data and we extended the length of our drill. So when I say drill, it's a horizontal directional drill. So we start at one side and we use a computer system to be able to accurately drill underneath the river, rather than, you know, digging up underneath the river, how they would have done a long time ago. And we extended that length based on our understanding of the movement of that specific river. We did every river on the project. And then we also did a scour analysis of the soil to understand the composition and how competent the soil was in terms of ability for landslides. We did that on PHMSA's recommendation following Satarcha. So although they haven't put it in their rules yet, they said, hey, pipeline companies, here's 300 pages, read it and follow it. And the lateral migration and scour analysis was in there. So we added that to our review. We added, I believe, hundreds of feet of bores in the state of Iowa. And we'll also, I can speak directly to how deep we are to that river, but in a lot of cases, large rivers were 40, 50, 60 feet underneath the ground.
Okay. Did either of you have any questions? Right now.
Not right now. no.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add, concerns, information that you desire that you haven't received or expect to receive?
Well, and there's a lot of people in the public here. I'm gonna back up to last February when I was just doing the normal hazmat training. Questions started to come up as I was doing training about carbon dioxide pipeline, and I'm like, well, I don't know. It's not common. We're used to propane and natural gas and ammonia and chlorine. Those are all hazardous materials in our community, and you could argue that some of them are worse than carbon dioxide, but so the first responders just asked questions, and we tried to do some plume modeling, or I did. And the program we use just didn't work that great with carbon dioxide, so plume modeling, I could tell the Clarion Fire Department, this is what it's gonna be at this temperature or this wind. With our program, we couldn't do that, but you guys have one that can do that, so that will be, if we could get the daytime versus nighttime and winter versus summer,
That will
those
all be
general,
in the emergency response plan.
and then they can see, hey, this is what to expect. And then as they understand the properties of carbon dioxide, and they have some capabilities, if there is a leak, a plume model is general, but they can go to someone's house and say, hey, it's safe or not safe. Should we leave them here or should we take them on? They could take a detector there, and that's very factual. So I feel comfortable that your first responders could do that and deploy those detector fairly quickly. And do that, so
And that's part of the work that we're doing is
Yeah.
with you guys,
Yeah.
make sure that you have the right equipment.
Yeah.
To do that.
That you're going to be doing,
Yes,
that you want to do it.
well, we started a conversation.
Okay, anything else?
No, just some plume modeling and then just. That would answer a lot of questions, you know, for them and knowing that they have, you guys have offered to assist them in getting some detection for carbon dioxide that they could take if there is an incident. You know, and I've been doing this a long time, guys, 30 years. I've been doing that. I can tell you how long I've been doing this, but a long time, but you know what? I would agree with the first gentleman's hazmat moves by pipeline, by rail, by highway. Every day, and it's just factual, the pipeline is the safest. We just passed, we didn't pass them, but came up to a nurse tank of anhydrous ammonia being pulled in a pickup truck. When I look at that, that's probably the least safest way, but it's in our community in whether it's the co-op or the railroad or the highway transportation company or the pipeline company, they don't want to have an accident. And then as things can fall through the cracks, you have first responders who do training and equipment that if an accident does happen, that they can respond and lessen the impact of it. Is that just a fact that those things there are going to be accidents that happen. So I would say you're Wright County responders, and again, I'm not saying because I'm here, they're pretty dialed in on what to do for incidents, and so you're in pretty good shape for me, knowing other counties in our region 5 and the state. Your county is probably one of the top tiers of being prepared in case an accident does happen. So for me, I just had some questions about carbon dioxide because it's new and how does it behave? We're used to a propane leak or an ammonia. We're used to that. So this was something new and just how does it behave and what's the best practices to respond to it. So I feel like we're in decent shape. I don't know, Andy, if you have anything. Andy's our hazmat coordinator of the hazmat team. So this Andy McLean here. So,
yeah, I'd say keeping the detectors and then the plume modeling and everything like that. Yeah, like the chief said, the pipeline is by far the safest we could transport anything. You know, we don't deal with many pipeline incidents when it's borders hitting gas lines or something like that, you know. But yeah, from our response standpoint, pipelines are very few and far between compared to fixed facilities or transportation.
Yeah. Actually, they use carbon dioxide for our soda dispensing machines at like Casey's or a Pizza Hut or Godfather's. They use carbon dioxide liquefied there. And there's been incidents around the country. So firefighters aren't unaware of the effects of carbon dioxide, but so they're using it to, you know, carbonate your soft drink in Casey's and it runs from a tank through a little plastic tubing in their building. And sometimes they have leaks and they have built-in alarms and stuff. Now they didn't used to. There was incidents that happened where it did drop oxygen in buildings like a convenience store. So it's not foreign to first responders, but the pipeline was a little bit different because it's going to be a larger volume. So just good questions and people just want facts and science behind it, and then they know what to do, how to react in case something does happen.
Okay, so I'll now open it up to public questions. Again, I would ask that we're not going to solve the eminent domain issue here. I can tell you that right now. I appreciate that. I appreciate what the Constitution says and that the battle against eminent domain. The people who are going to talk pro for it are not going to address eminent domain usually, as you've seen in the comments. The people or the landowners that are concerned about the use of eminent domain, again, I appreciate that fight. I appreciate your constitutional rights, but we're not going to solve that at this level. So, but if you have questions for our local hazmat or for Summit Carbon Solutions on anything that they presented on today, I would open it up for comments. Yes, Judy.
I have just two quick questions. Okay, all your electronic things are in Ames, correct? Is that where your home,
The control,
Yeah,
Yeah.
our control room is named, yes.
okay, and you have said that it will be manned 24 hours a day, correct?
Yes,
Is what you mean by manned, is that manned by a computer or a human being?
a human being.
You will have a person,
24/7.
okay? And I guess one of my main concerns about the safety is you have a lot of rural people here. And how in the world would you notify? You keep using the word leak, but at 2,100 pounds per square inch, that's more than a leak. If an event happens, how do you notify me out in the country that there is a perceived rupture?
So we'll build that out depending on the capabilities of each county's emergency response plan. They have the ability to use the reverse 911 system, which is.
But not everybody, you know, in our county, we have that great thing of the,
Code red.
yeah, code red. But you have to sign up for it. And I doubt very much whether everybody has signed up for it. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore. It's cell phones. At night, I don't sleep with my phone next to me. So if it were at night, how can you cover all of those gaps?
Two sides. One, I do think that's why we were, anxiously waiting for this report about sheltering in place. In terms of at night ruptures, people are in their homes. What do we need to do in terms of emergency response? Right, that's gonna be a big piece. This is obviously just a preliminary study that kind of came out. We gave really good data, so that's gonna be a big piece of it. And then we're gonna work with emergency responders. How in other situations do we get notification out there? And they're gonna give us that information. We're gonna have our own notification system that's gonna say, hey, sign up for your red system, or so we'll have mailers that go out and notifications we send out saying, hey, do this so that you're prepared for situations. So we have you signed up for the right systems. Obviously, we cannot force people to come to our required public awareness trainings, but when they come to our public awareness training, we'll walk through all of those processes. We can't require people to sign up for systems, but we'll say, hey, it is in your best interest, our best interest for everyone to be signed up for these systems. No, we can't force you. You can't take your cell phone and then sign up, but we're gonna tell you all the facts, and if you want to follow the process, you can.
I think in the worst case scenario, being that someone doesn't sign up for it, someone doesn't get notified. Then, then we work, we're responding to, if there's an incident, we're responding to it as a company along with emergency management. And then, we have all the data, we know where all the homes and businesses and people are. So then, if we can, then that's where we get with the emergency management to, possibly go knock on doors, and we have our monitors, so we can tell if we can do that or not, or with the right equipment, go in and do that. So that would be, kind of the worst case scenario that, but it can be done that way.
any other questions? Comments? Go ahead, Todd.
What's the threshold of death? Like, nobody has said that. Nobody has said a single thing about if this thing ruptures, and when it does, if you're standing next to it, will it kill you? Because if you have that much carbon dioxide in your lungs, asphyxiation, all the things that go along with it, nobody has said what the threshold of death is. Every one of you people in those companies, should be aware of this, because if somebody asks you, I don't know what's gonna kill you. Well, you're putting it in the ground. So you should know what's the threshold is for death with this. So what's the oxygenation level? What's the carbon dioxide level? Granted, we've got a variety of people, right? So their health is gonna be different. So if there's a range that says, okay, the average person can tolerate this amount of carbon dioxide, nobody has said a lick of that. of what will actually kill you. If I'm going across my farm, and if I've got 100,000 pound semi going across that pipeline that you guys put in my farm, and it cracks and I'm in that thing, guess what? I'm dead. Like that is death right there. So you guys have not addressed that at all. You said plume modeling 200 feet, 50 feet, whatever it is. It's a reality that the weight of this, the agricultural equipment in this day and age, 100,000 pounds is nothing. If we drive over across to that thing and it ruptures when we're over the top of it, we're dead. They can't do anything about it 45 minutes away. The EMS can't do anything about it 20 minutes away. We are dead. You guys have not talked about that at all. So what is the threshold of death? So if you're talking about all these 18, 20 pulse oxygens, all those things, right? There should be a level that is required to you to disclose what will kill you, period.
Yeah, I think, well, so I can answer a couple ways. So if, yeah, so obviously there's a lot, there's 2 million plus miles of pipeline across the country that are driven over every day and things like that, right? If someone strikes the pipeline.
I'm not talking about straight. I'm talking about driving over the top.
Driving over the top of it should not be risky. Okay, unless you hit it and damage it, that's when there's a risk. Okay, so that's why, you know, the one call system is very important, probably good before you dig.
Sure.
Now, if you hit that pipeline, it's high pressure, right? So that's not gonna be good for anybody.
Right.
It's not gonna be the CO2, it's gonna be the pressure. Okay, but when we talk about CO2, okay, there's gonna be the concentration is gonna be higher right there.
Absolutely.
Compared, because then it's gonna dissipate off. So like we talked about earlier, you know, it's hard to put a specific percentage or anything on it.
Right.
But when you get down to, you know, somewhere around 12-13% oxygen levels.
Sure.
And depending on health condition and all that, once you get down in there and then below that, that's where you can become unconscious and you can eventually die.
Absolutely.
From oxygen.
The same thing would happen with anhydrous. You know, in the pipelines. It's your natural gas.
Sure.
So you guys know what the exposure is for anhydrous? To kill somebody.
Yeah. So in the same concept would be true. If I'm working at Gold Eagle and I'm filling a nurse tank and a hose breaks, I'm in trouble right there.
Absolutely.
If I live 500 feet downwind, I could be in trouble, but I'm in a lot less trouble than the person that was there. That's all factual.
But you know.
Yeah, and we know the numbers he's saying, if it, you know, gets down to that 12-13% oxygen that their plume modeling would show us, we know someone's not gonna be able to escape and they'd be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So they're gonna do some plume modeling that they're gonna share with first responders, and they'll be able to say, hey, if there was a break in this area, the outcome's probably not gonna be real good for people.
Right.
Just like we do that with ammonia right now and chlorine right now, so it's very well known that how much oxygen deficiency will not let someone escape and.
Absolutely.
And
It's like putting a bag over your head and trying to run.
Yeah. So the plume modeling would tell us those facts, and we asked for it because it's gonna be different daytime versus nighttime. So winds die down at night, and like that first gentleman said, it's very counterintuitive.
Sure.
But a windy day is a good day to have a leak because it helps disperse the material. Nighttime in cool weather is actually gonna make stuff hang around a little bit better. So if they provide the plume modeling, which they said they would, and all the first responders have that, they'll know.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we get down to 12%, you're talking somewhere around 400,000 parts per million or million dioxide, which is 40% in there.
Yeah, because CO2 is used in the gill industry for livestock.
Yeah.
And the concentrations are gonna be a lot less in that than it would be if you're right next to that pipeline at Rupture.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. That at the rupture site,
Yes.
if there is, that's where you're gonna have your highest concentration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Looking at some of the stuff we looked at, like, anhydrous ammonia has 300 parts per million IDLH.
Different creatures, different parts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
carbon dioxide's up to 40,000, so.
Completely different creatures. I don't-
And then PHMSA requires depth of cover, the minimum 36 inches. This pipeline would be minimum 48 inches at the top of the pipe. So we're going actually low.
If it goes.
Any other questions? Bob,
Dean,
hang on just a second. Go ahead, Bob.
A statement, for what I know now, I haven't done enough research on it, but the plume modeling that everybody's talking about was done with what basically a military term, a shape charge. I wanna blow up that table, you wanna blow the wood on it. The tabletop. I know what will break that, and I know that it'll take a different charge. And if I wanna blow it completely up, I'll put X amount, that's how they experiment with that stuff. And a pipeline, and that's my understanding is what they did, they took X amount of charge and put it on the pipeline to make X amount of exit. I agree with her 100%, the variability on this, and it's almost impossible for these guys to have an exact, it'll be like flying a plane, you got an envelope. You get outside that envelope, you're in trouble. You'll at least have an envelope, and these guys need to know that before they put this stupid thing in the ground. They could solve a lot of problems if they just get all this in a row. If our leaders in Des Moines, the legislature, PHMSA and DC, if everybody would just work together on this a little bit and have a little pre-planning, just a little bit, it wouldn't take that much. Everybody says it's expensive, yeah, it's expensive, so big deal.
Yeah.
So if you live out in the country, your life isn't worth anything. I don't think we think that way, not in Wright County anyway, but anyway, it's just, so if these guys got something to work with, I mean, you talk about military, if you're in the military and you're a soldier, you're in a battle, you know somebody's gonna shoot back at you. These guys go out there and put their lives on the line, and they have no idea of even an envelope of what it's gonna be. So that's just, I'd just like to see a little more research and stuff done on this so that they could give everybody, the people that might affect the people who've got to protect the people, some more knowledge and make sure everybody has the tools that they need for this.
Anyone else?
Sandy had a
Oh, Sandy, go ahead.
thank you, I'm good. I answered my question.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes.
It's just a comment of the why. Why do we, what's that?
State your name,
Oh,
please.
Boone Morgan, Gold Eagle. Why do we take these risks? Why do we haul ammonia on our roadways, propane, fuel, that these guys even have to deal with to begin with? There are a lot of challenges out there on our roadways and why do we do it? As Wright County, as Webster County, as rural Iowa, it's all about opportunity. Corn, soybeans, agriculture, that's us here in Iowa. And our corn bushels, whether you grow one or not, sell one or not, this pipeline depends, or we depend on this pipeline for opportunities for selling corn, which affects everybody, whether you own a piece of dirt, sell a bushel in a year or not. It affects everybody. Now, I know in some certain scenarios, it might run closer to someone's homes than what they prefer or like anything else, or across their land, they may not like it, and I get that, and to the eminent domain piece, it won't be solved necessarily, but you know, we had an opportunity, South Beagle Grove, a tremendous opportunity where a pipeline went below the river twice, and I hope the due diligence was done then. The same way that it was getting looked at now, to your question, Betty. So the opportunity for corn growers in our area, in our state, this presents a heck of an opportunity. That's all I'd like to say.
So I have just another question for Cornell, since you spoke up, is what other avenues of CO2 capture has Gold Eagle looked at?
I can answer that, Betty.
Mark would be-
I'm Mark Wiggins, Goldfield. Chairman of Cornell. We've looked at a lot of different opportunities. And I think, you know, if the pipeline doesn't go through, going back to Steve's comments, the CO2 is probably traveling down Highway 17, Highway 3, or on rail out of here. So it'll be captured, transported, whether it's in a pipe or a truck.
So when you say a lot, what type of carbon capture have you looked at? You said a
Well,
lot.
there's multiple opportunities out there, Betty, but right now, the viable one is sequestration. Taking it to a pop bottle or a hog kill does part of the real bit viable.
Yeah, no,
Maybe you could use Poets model.
What's that about?
What is it?
Yeah.
Go to the carbon, there's an app on your phone you can get. It tells all what it's doing. And they say the same thing as you do. That's the number one, but that's because the taxpayers are gonna pick up the tab. That's the only reason we're doing it. Money.
I think, Mark, probably specifically to Betty's question and what Bob is alluding to is, has Gold Eagle looked into turning CO2 into methanol, I think is the science that's out there right now. There was a presentation done at the ethanol industry conference that was held down in Florida. And I think that people are probably wondering, have we looked into that?
Well,
First of all,
being some of the stuff.
We did talk about that.
Confidentiality agreements and different things like that I can't.
Okay, understood.
Everything. we can do too.
Understood.
I mean, one of the drawbacks about the green methanol system was we'd have to put about 110 windmills to run the power to do that.
Corn Belt and supply and power.
If it's green, it needs to come from green sources.
Oh, it's all
Not really
credits.
small
Okay,
windmills.
understood. Any other questions? Yes, Julie.
Yeah, I just, have to ask maybe EMS officials that this whole pipeline is gonna be going within 600 feet of our home. Our home lies a little downhill from the pipeline route. And if there would be a rupture close to our home, what is the plan? If there engulfs our home or property, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna come in and help people?
Emergency response wise, we would put proper PPE on, so if we come in and do the air monitoring to see what the levels are, what the oxygen level is, and everything like that, see what it is around your home. And then
Are
if
you
we,
coming from Fort Dodge with that equipment to people in Wright County? Those to our home have that?
the local departments would start with it and then I would assume contact us.
If they,
The way Region 5 hazmat works is the local departments have to contact us in order for us to be deployed per se. So the local departments would get the initial call and then they would start calling us.
But they would take action
They would take-
long before we got here. So whether it's Eagle
They don't
Grove
have
or
stuff.
Clarion or Belmont, I don't know where you live, but your local fire department.
do they have self-contained readings?
Yeah, oh, yeah. They're regular firefighting, breathing apparatus, all the departments have it.
I just have to say, this is the first CO2 pipeline someone has installed. Temsa was here for a reason. The federal agency came here because they're concerned about safety issues. We need to put a pause on this. We need to wait for them to do the work. We've got putting thousands of lives in danger here. And I know it's all about the money. What are our lives worth? I mean, that's true, so it's all about the money here. And I think we're worth more than that. I think keeping us safe and doing it right from the beginning is. It's so important. None of you have this going on your home, I don't imagine. But the people who do really are concerned.
Yes.
Well, and I mean, we came here today looking for
State name.
information, and so far we haven't heard anything new. It's the same story, you know, after construction begins, they'll come around with plume studies and talk to EMS people. And I mean, we've heard that since February, or since it started. You know, that'll be done after we've built the pipeline, and we listened to people from Sartartia. And they took 45 out of 47 people that lived in that town to the hospital. And the reason they didn't report it as, you know, people weren't held overnight, so they didn't have to report it as, you know, as injuries. So people were held overnight for observation, but nobody was admitted. I mean, there
were people that.
and they had to walk EMS. That was a mile from the release. CO2 leaked for over 4 hours after the initial rupture. EMS people walked with bottles on that whole town, dragging people out. And they had, all their vehicles died. So they were on foot. And I don't know.
So you can see there's definite concerns with plume modeling, which I have shared with you over and over that we need this information. I mean, we want this information. The landowners, I think, have a right to see that information if you're gonna live close to this thing. So.
And Dean, I hear you.
I know that you do. I know that you do.
You know, I know I come back to this, but US security, the TSA, we are critical infrastructure. You cannot point to a dispersion analysis that's been publicly released in the last 15 years because it's deemed critical infrastructure. So we can't go out and say, this is our dispersion analysis, take a look, because there are US security risks to that. And I mean, that's just what it comes down to, you know?
And again, that is one of the concerns. Why can't we do the modeling in a program that our first responders have access to the information, and with information that if the true threshold is something that we gave a wider area when we're routing the pipeline, there needs to be something that reassures the public of the safety of this. The people who are in the leadership of the county need to know that information. I mean, I want to know it. That's one of the things that I'm charged with sitting in this chair. So, and I think that I can know that and not compromise the safety of the United States as critical infrastructure. So, and definitely our first responders can do that. So. Okay, yes, Bob.
Well, talking about if it's so safe, why can't we get liability insurance? You say you can drive over with a 100,000-pound truck and it won't break. Well, then why in the heck doesn't our insurance company say that? Oh, no, if it's a release, we can't get liability and coverage. Well, it's important to me.
Well, I'm not saying it's not important. I said, I don't know I'm not an insurance expert.
We own the pipeline. It is our pipeline. We are required to hold the liability insurance.
I'm gonna get sued if it goes corrupt, if it breaks on my land. You can bet I will. If somebody's hurt they're gonna sue everybody involved. Now, eventually, you will pay for it. Some will, maybe. Some it's insurance company. But in the meantime, I'm sued, I've got to defend myself. That means I've got lawyer's fees. Normally, my insurance would cover that, my liability insurance. Now it doesn't.
The easement. Where.
Well, the easement says that.
All landowners from all actions with the exception of intentional malicious acts. If you look at the 2 million miles of pipeline in this ground, no one but the pipeline company holds the insurance for it. We are required at every level to hold mass amounts.
That doesn't mean I'm not gonna get sued.
I think that falls within, I'm not gonna say I'm an expert, but in the indemnity clause that engulfs that risk.
I don't think so. I think I can get sued. If something happens on my land, I can get sued.
Probably an issue, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but it seems to me that that would be an issue that the legislature should take up in some way. They just
But they
did
won't.
some work with that with the trucking industry, so. Anyone else? I don't want to drag this out forever.
Do you have the eminent domain board in place?
We do not have the eminent domain board in place yet. We have a few members that are, but we're still working on getting that in place.
We are working on getting some of the people replaced that are no longer there.
Right.
Or in a nursing home. We are working on that, yes.
And how about the ordinances on the history tile?
I meet with myself and Courtney meet with David Johnson. This should be the final thing, and then that ordinance should be coming up concerning the drainage districts. Okay.
Dean,
Yes.
as a lifelong resident of Wright County, farmer. The safety thing, and we got pipelines going through farm and farm, drive over them all the time. Natural gas and natural gas, sure. I feel way safer farming over a pipeline than I do seeing truck after truck going in front of my house with hazardous materials. And I just think, I know there's concerns among the people. And I know it's about the money. I understand all that. But man, I just think we tear at the long picture, this saves so much possibility of injury or death. There might be one catastrophic thing, which there's been one in this country. But you're looking at accidents that happen around the state, around this county all the time, and I just think we're blinding ourselves to all the other problems that we have.
I wouldn't argue, statistically, that is, you hit the nail on the head. Pipelines are safer than trucking it or putting it on rail. That is probably one of the smaller issues in encompassing the entire project. But that is a factual statement. I would agree 100% with that. Definitely. Okay. Thank Bob.
Well, PHMSA doesn't have an enforcement division.
Pardon me?
PHMSA doesn't have an enforcement division. PHMSA didn't enforce their own regulations in Satartia. Denbury didn't follow the rules. We know that. They didn't train their first responders, they didn't do anything, and that went on for years.
PHMSA actually does have enforcement, and I think I forget if it was 400 or 600 that covers all of the pipelines. We're talking millions of miles of pipeline, but they do have in this case, you're right, in the investigation, if anybody's interested in reading that, I have the Satarsha investigation.
I have it here
report.
too,
But they do have,
but they weren't, they didn't. They didn't
they
have
did in
enough.
that case, you are correct. You're correct. Okay, thank you for presenting and for addressing questions. I think you see the concerns. I know that you do.
Yes.
Steve, thank you for coming and addressing these concerns. You guys will be the first ones, I'm assuming, that are gonna get to see the full models. Okay, thank you much.
Take a 15 or 10 minutes.
Yes, let's take a 10-minute, I've got 10:56, we'll be in recess until 10 minutes past 11. Okay, we are back out of recess. We're gonna move down to item number 13. Consider going into closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Chapter 21.51, J as in Juliet, to discuss the purchase or sale of a particular real estate only where the premature disclosure could reasonably expected to increase the governmental body would have to pay for that property or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for that property.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Orders on.
Yes, it is.
Okay, we are in closed session. It is 11:10 in the morning. Present are the three supervisors, Helgevold, Rasmussen, Clues, Auditor Ellis, Sheriff Lutenhofer, our Conservation Director, Engineer Adam Clemens, and Economic Development Director, Daryl Stephen Carlisle.
So I had one more item, with the idea that last week we approved, borings down to a certain level, 40 feet each. After discussing it with Dave Logerman, he did allude to that there is limestone, in the area. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. One, on the map, he has listed the 3 locations, of where they've seen boring logs for the Iowa DNR, or IDOLs. One at the house, one at the scale house, and then one at Turner's. And you can see the depths of the limestone there. His proposal, the first item that you had in the front of it was the original proposal, which still stands for the 40-foot depth borings. The second one is to actually go down and core to see how much limestone is there.
At that same level or deeper?
Deeper.
Okay.
To go to find, so he's proposing 3 spots, which are boring number 9. You can see it on the map. So boring number 9, boring number 1, and boring number 6 to go down to bedrock with the initial investigation, find bedrock, see the quality of it as it's coming up, and then core it, and then pull out the original investigation tool, and then send a core down to see how thick the bedrock is. He said most people, if they were, oh, you're still on.
Okay, we are out of closed session. I would make a motion to proceed with Plan A as amended. And discussed in closed session.
Oh, second.
I have a motion and Carl seconded the motion to proceed with Plan A as amended and discussed in closed session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. You want these back?
Motion carried.
So I pulled in mine.
Correct. You want that for your minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, item
11.
before you leave, Adam, you're going to give us information concerning that or
If you want me to just kind of off the cuff, I mean, I have the documents in front of you, for the pertaining to the fuel bid. We did do the fuel bid last Monday. It came out to 0.078, with the same, vendor that we have currently have, so Advantage FS. And then I'll have you guys take motion or an action on it on Wednesday.
okay. Looks good. So that's price above rack price.
Yep.
That's, I'm pretty sure it's the same. They didn't go up or down.
Okay. Okay. All right, moving to item number 11. Which was a timed event that I blew through as Summit was here. Hold the third reading of resolution 2023-23 on declaring emergency medical services an essential service in Wright County, Iowa, and appointing a Wright County EMS System Advisory Council. This will be the third and final reading of this.
I'll make a motion to approve the third and final reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the third and final reading of resolution 2023-23 on declaring emergency medical services an essential service in Wright County, Iowa. And appointing a Wright County EMS System Advisory Council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, we will be in
Recess till 1
Till 1
o'clock.
o'clock.
till 1 o'clock.